Journey through time and uncover the events, people, and civilizations that shaped our world. Welcome to the Vault of History.
Welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining me today because we are looking at a piece of history that literally redefines the word epic. I mean, we're talking massive empires, fragile kingdoms, brilliant tacticians, and scrappy mountain rebels all locked in a staggering struggle for the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, let's dive into this because we have a ton of ground to cover. We're unpacking the Reconquista, a monumental conflict between Christians and Muslims that completely shaped the map of Europe and, honestly, the world as we know it today. To really get this, we first got to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the timeline, right? When we think of long historical conflicts, our minds naturally go to the 30 Years' War, or maybe the 100 Years' War, which, fun fact, actually spanned 116 years. But look at the massive scale of the numbers here. Neither of those even holds a candle to the Reconquista. We are talking about 781 years of continuous generational pendulum swings. That is almost 8 centuries of border clashes, shifting alliances, and incredible cultural exchanges. It is an absolutely massive stretch of human history. So let's set the stage. The year is 711 AD. Down in the Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain and Portugal, you have the Visigothic kingdom. Now, on paper, they looked great. Wealthy, Christian, centralized, but in reality, they were politically brittle and just tearing themselves apart with endless personal vendettas. Meanwhile, just across the water in North Africa, it was a totally different story. Waiting to the south was the Umayyad dynasty. And these guys weren't just regional warlords. They were the absolute global superpower of the day. A unified, well-oiled machine stretching literally all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the mountains of Persia. At this time, the Umayyad governor in North Africa had tens of thousands of newly converted Berber recruits, and these men had been promised wealth and glory. But all they were getting were small, tedious skirmishes with mountain tribes. They wanted something economically worth their time. So they look across the street to this wealthy yet super fragile Visigoth kingdom. And in the year 711, a Berber general named Tariq bin Ziyad crosses the narrow strait to what is now Gibraltar, with an army of just 7,000 men. Now, General Tariq wasn't treating this as some casual weekend raid. No, he was going all or nothing. To make absolutely sure none of his men got cold feet or even thought about retreating, he supposedly ordered his own transport ships to be burned right there on the shore. Then, turning to his men, he delivered this incredibly chilling, dramatic line: "Behind you is the sea, before you is the enemy. You have nothing left but your faith and your swords." I mean, talk about raising the stakes. To understand the Umayyad motivation here, we really have to look at the historical context of their expansion. So the crucial point is understanding the concept of jihad. Now, while that word is often heavily loaded with modern politics, historically for the Umayyads, it translated simply to holy war. It was viewed as a divine duty to expand Islam into new lands, enforce justice, and bring non-Muslim populations under their administration. This was the powerful ideological engine driving this unstoppable imperial machine forward. Up north, the Visigothic king Roderick finally realizes, a major invasion is happening. He amasses a huge army and meets Tariq's forces by a river in the south. Tariq was vastly outnumbered. We're talking odds of 3-1. But remember how brittle the Visigoths were? Half the Christian nobles actually wanted King Roderick to fail. So, right in the middle of the battle, some of Roderick's forces just switch sides, and others literally just walk away. The command line completely breaks down, and Tariq's tiny 7,000-man army absolutely crushes the Visigoths. King Roderick vanishes in the chaos, and just like that, a 300-year-old kingdom is completely erased. What happens next is astonishingly fast. Tariq realizes he's broken the kingdom, so he just sweeps north. Within months, Córdoba, Granada, and the capital, Toledo, all fall. Just notice how rapidly this unfolds. Tariq lands in 711. By 718, nearly the entire Iberian Peninsula is under Muslim control and renamed Al-Andalus. The momentum was so crazy that by 720, Umayyad armies were already staring at the Pyrenees Mountains, crossing right into southern France to raid the Frankish kingdom. But the Franks? Yeah, they weren't about to just roll over. They were led by Charles Martel. Now, he wasn't even a king, he was basically the CEO of the army. And in 732, Charles decides to put a hard stop to these Umayyad raids at the Battle of Tours. The Muslim army was incredibly fast with devastating cavalry, but Charles had heavy, super disciplined infantry. He forms this dense wall of shields on a wooded hill and just waits for an entire week. When the Muslims finally attack, they just ram into that shield wall, wave after wave. In the chaos, the Umayyad commander is killed, sparking a panicked Muslim retreat back to Al-Andalus. A hard border in Europe was suddenly drawn. Now, what's really interesting about this misty northern border is what was happening deep in the mountains of Iberia. While the rest of the peninsula was adjusting to Muslim rule, this tiny, tiny spark of Christian resistance survived. Led by a local warlord named Pelayo, a few hundred stubborn ex-soldiers, farmers, and monks just flat out refused to pay taxes to the new rulers. They formed the Kingdom of Asturias. But let's be real. Actually, scratch that. Kingdom is a very generous word here. At this point, it was basically a handful of huts, a church, and a very optimistic cave. But independent is independent, and the Umayyads did not like that one bit. So they sent a small tax collection task force into the narrow mountain pass of Covadonga to just snuff Pelayo out. But Pelayo's men were waiting. From the high cliffs, they literally rain rocks and arrows down on the Muslim force, turning this narrow pass into a one-sided massacre. Now, militarily, it was a tiny skirmish that didn't change the map, but psychologically, it was everything. It birthed the legend that the mighty Umayyad Empire wasn't invincible after all, and this moment is widely considered the official start of the Reconquista. Meanwhile, a total geopolitical earthquake happens in the Muslim world. Over in Damascus, the Umayyad Caliphate gets completely overthrown in a spectacular bloodbath by a rival clan called the Abbasids, who then move the capital over to Baghdad. But get this, one Umayyad prince, Abd al-Rahman, actually manages to survive. After running for his life, he crosses the Mediterranean, lands in Al-Andalus, and boldly declares himself the independent emir of Cordoba in 756. He completely severs ties with Baghdad, shifting Al-Andalus from just a distant province into a powerful, totally self-sufficient state. And under this new emirate, Al-Andalus experiences an absolute golden age. Honestly, it is genuinely awe-inspiring what they accomplished here. We're talking massive libraries that completely dwarfed anything in Northern Europe. They introduced highly advanced irrigation systems, brought in citrus agriculture, made incredible groundbreaking leaps in algebra, and designed architecture that will literally still leave you breathless today. Cordoba became this wealthy, glittering beacon of learning. You even had Christian scholars traveling south just to study their Arabic philosophy. But golden ages require unity. And by 1009, a brutal civil war erupts, tearing the caliphate apart. Within just 20 years, the once unified Al-Andalus shatters into dozens of independent, rival Muslim city-states known as taifas. And here is where it gets crazy. In a spectacular display of counterproductive politics, these rival Muslim princes start paying the northern Christian kings for protection against each other. Yes, Muslim rulers were literally and enthusiastically funding the exact Christian armies that were actively praying for their ultimate downfall. You really cannot make this stuff up. This irony builds into a massive turning point. The Christians up north smell the opportunity. Those cave dwellers of Asturias, well, they had evolved into fully established kingdoms: Leon, Castile, Navarre, and Aragon. Seeing the south fractured into 20 pieces, they initiate history's ultimate Uno reverse. They start this slow, centuries-long chess match of sieges, royal marriages, and brutal betrayals, just grinding their way south, fort by fort, taking full advantage of the divided taifas. And this brilliantly illustrates the turning of the tide, the year 1085. King Alfonso VI of Castile pulls off a major historical flex by capturing Toledo, the ancient Visigothic capital. This hit differently. Capturing Toledo sent a loud, totally undeniable message across the entire peninsula that the Reconquista was no longer just some hopeful mountain legend. It was real, the momentum was unstoppable, and it was happening right now. So the taifas completely panic. To save themselves from the Christians, they call in the Almoravids, this hardline, super strict dynasty from North Africa. The Almoravids cross the strait and immediately halt the Christian advance in 1086. But power in Iberia corrupts fast. Decades later, the Almoravids lose their zeal, so an even stricter, puritanical group called the Almohads replaces them. The Almohads rebuild the southern empire and actually push north, handing the Christians a devastating defeat at Alarcos in 1195. The pendulum had violently swung right back. So, here we are. It's the early 1200s. The mighty Almohad Empire is pushing north, and the Christian kingdoms are totally on the defensive. After centuries of grinding warfare, shifting alliances, and incredible cultural heights, who is going to win this ultimate battle of the two faiths? Who will ultimately rule the Iberian Peninsula? The tension at this point was absolutely at a boiling point. The answer comes in the year 1212. In a super rare moment of complete cooperation, the Christian kingdoms of Castile, Aragon, and Navarre, joined by crusaders from France, unite into a massive coalition. They meet the Almohads deep in the Andalusian hills at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, and it was a brutal, decisive clash. The Christian coalition completely breaks through the lines and shatters the Almohad army. This was the fatal blow. Over the next few decades, the Christians rapidly swallow up huge cities like Córdoba and Seville. Muslim Spain was functionally broken. Well, almost. Against all odds, one single Muslim kingdom manages to hold out: Granada. Tucked securely beneath the Sierra Nevada mountains, this small, incredibly wealthy jewel survived for a staggering 200 extra years. And they didn't do it through military supremacy. No, they did it through pure, absolute diplomatic genius. They walked a 200-year political tightrope, paying tribute to Castile, marrying into Christian courts, and expertly playing their enemies against each other just to buy themselves 2 more centuries of survival. But every tightrope eventually frays. By the late 1400s, the Christian kingdoms finally merge into one Spanish superstate through the marriage of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the famous Catholic monarchs. They launch a grueling 10-year military campaign to close the noose around Granada once and for all. And finally, on January 2nd, 1492, under the shadow of the breathtaking Alhambra Palace, the last Muslim ruler surrenders the keys to the city. After 781 mind-boggling years, the Reconquista was officially over. But here is the wild part. You literally cannot understand modern history without this final piece of the puzzle. That exact same year, 1492, the Reconquista didn't just end, it pivoted. Ferdinand and Isabella, flushed with the victory of a 781-year holy war, took that exact same fire of conquest, that exact same military momentum, and funded an Italian sailor named Christopher Columbus. The centuries of warfare that forged Spain directly fueled the sails that headed west, sparking the birth of global colonialism in the Americas. Which leaves us with one massive question to ponder. If that tiny 8th century mountain ambush at Covadonga had failed, what would the map of our modern world look like today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope you found it as absolutely fascinating as I do.
History never ends, it only continues through time. Thank you for watching The Vault of History.